Hello, my name is Lizzy Palmer and this is another episode of Lunar Poetry Shorts, and today I'm joined by Alexander Woodward. Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
Not bad, how's you?
Good, I'm not too bad either, thanks.
Hurrah.
Excellent. So, by way of introduction, as we always do, we'll start with a poem, please.
Okay. This poem is called Should I Have a Daughter? Should I have a daughter? That's not a question, it's a pause for thought. You see, I wonder what I ought to tell her. First thing, I suppose, is that she shouldn't back down when she's right just because somebody yells at her. Equally, though, she should know to apologise when she's wrong. It's not that nice, but it doesn't take too long, and then, when she's done, she can go back to being friends with whomever she made amends. Second thing is that she can believe what she likes, but has to be able to justify her thoughts, for I will challenge her. No daughter of mine is going to be a knee-jerk of any sort. Nobody likes a bigot, so I shall disconnect from the plumbing that particular spigot, which is a posh word for tap. Good. Third is a thing at which I myself am crap. It's a good lesson, though I've barely learnt it. You only get the reward if you've sweated and toiled and bloody well earned it. To do well, to aim high, one has to grit one's teeth and really fucking try. But if trying's not enough and she still fails, then I'll be there with a consoling word and a lovely, lovely ale, which she can drink by the pint. My pale, hairy arse will that be thought of as being unladylike. 4. I hope I can give her the space she needs, but if she calls me, I'll storm on in, a knight in shining tweed. Zeus help whomever leaves her in tears for a day or a year, or dares to forget her, for I will give them such a vicious handwritten letter, and I'll charge the bastard for the postage. But what I want for her most is that she will be interesting, for the interesting will inherit the world, and then they'll go, "Oh, thank you. Oh, that will come in handy. Oh, look." And then she'll go back to her book, for my daughter will read and she will like it. And that's not a threat, it's a prediction. You see, in my family, reading is an inbuilt predilection, a source of affection. And she'll read in Latin, I hope, so we can talk about life in a dead tongue and I can share the ancients' wisdom on how to cope. It's my hope that this list, although parts of it were written half-pissed, will be sufficient preparation. I want for as long as possible to save her from the realisation that Daddy doesn't know everything. He's just as scared and confused as the rest of the world. But he'll try. And that's a promise to you, my as yet completely hypothetical little girl.
Wonderful, thank you.
Welcome.
Right, so my first question is, why poetry?
Two-strand attack on this one. I've loved poetry for ever, because I've got an older brother and a younger sister. There's 5 years between them. So when we were small, finding something for Mum to read us at bedtime was hard, because there's not going to be something that'll story-wise that'll capture everyone's attention, and you can't get through enough of a book in any one sitting to avoid tedium. So Mum read us poetry, a lot of Edward Lear and the Hilda Boswell children's collection of verse and things like that. As far as doing it, it came about accidentally because I wanted to be a comedian. I wrote a sketch in school, and then when I went to university I swapped to stand-up, and the poetry just accidentally happened because I couldn't sleep one night and I thought, sod it, I'll try writing a sonnet, see if I can, and kept that up for a few years, just for me, because I enjoyed the process. And then I made the mistake of accidentally memorising it and reciting one while hammered in someone's front room, and they said, "Oh, this is brilliant, you've got to do it." And so I slowly kept doing it because it seems to be going quite well.
Yeah. It's I really like that question, because while it seems a bit simplistic maybe. Everyone's answers so far have been totally different, and it's really interesting for me to find out.
Well, that's what we're here for, isn't it? Interesting.
Yeah. So since you have been writing, what have been the main influences over your development as a writer?
Well, there's a fair amount of Latin poetry in it, because my degree was in classics, so you read enough of something, it sticks in your head. So if you know what you're looking for, I'm told there's a fair amount of Horace and Ovid in certainly my imagery and my structure, I'm told. Apart from that, it's there's a fair amount of stagecraft from the comedy and from acting in trying to get an arc, because with my background, I wrote specifically with speaking it to an audience in mind. That's what I write, so that's how it came out. And so if you're doing that, you need to the ideas come like jokes. You start with a funny bit, the bit in your head, and then you have to track back until you get to a point where the audience can get on board with you, and then you can follow it to a decent conclusion. And so there's, as far as the writing itself goes, it's identical in process to trying to write stand-up comedy. It's just what comes out is a little different.
Yeah. Great. Well, now we'll have a second poem, please, if that's okay.
Lovely. Do you want? I think I'll do a love poem. Love poems are great. They're like the little black dress of literature. They never go out of style, and everyone's always surprised that I've got a lot of them. This one is called... Yeah, I'll do this one. This one is called Why Can't I Sleep? Why can't I sleep? Is it hastily scrawled emails hanging Damoclean above my pillow, waiting for a reply and free from light stringy restraint to plunge? Is it thoughts of unwon kudos cavorting in orcish glee and jabbing me with gouging pikes of self-doubt? Do mind and soul rush down untrod roads, hoping to catch a glimpse of some unknown, unseeable monument to my greatness? No. So, why can't I sodding well sleep? Why do thoughts spin and make me nauseous? Why am I plagued by thoughts of one met but barely met, known but unfamiliar? It's all so similar to angsty dross, so in need of exercising, of recognising it for what shit it is. Fiction. Fantasy. Guff. You don't love her. Because you don't know her, that's why. You've hardly met. And yet it is an intriguing thought, one which one ought to dismiss as idle fancy. But if you act, she might accept, or at least not laugh full derisive in your face. Mark this place, and seek her face, to ask, to test, to see what that face does to me. It's a buzz, you see, a joy for me. One quick smile and this boy is floored by she who hoards my dreams and keeps them. Let her keep them. Or we could share them, be a pair then, and all content lie back and stare 10 hours at stars and lights and at each other's eyes and talk of all the things we ought to have done but didn't. We didn't because I wouldn't. Not if I had the time with you, I couldn't. I'd be ensnared and scared to tread on this joyous bubble and be befuddled when it takes my weight and takes on shape and becomes reality. That would be really quite okay for me. But for now, I dream, but still don't sleep.
Thank you.
Welcome.
So you touched a little bit on how you structure your work. Mm-hmm. Maybe you could tell us a bit more about your actual writing process.
That's a very grandiose title for what a process. It involves chocolate digestives, dressing gowns, and the kitchen, really. Writing's a thing that happens when I'm sober at 2 o'clock in the morning. Ideas occur and I let them wander, and occasionally my brain will stumble across it's often a single line there's something pleasing about it. Either I like the concept, or it's rhythmically pleasing, or it's a line that sparks something, and I forget half of them, and then half of them that I do remember never make it to anything. And about I know it works out a couple of times a week, I've got an evening or a weekend, I'll sit with my massive stack of post-it notes and half-written memos on my phone and see if I can recreate the thought, and if I can, then I apply the structure of starting in the middle and working either side.
I think it's a bit of a hard question, really, because the word process, I suppose, implies a very definite set way of something happening, and it's obviously not really like that.
No.
Ever. I don't think, for most people.
Would that it were.
I might change that question. So, how long have you been performing your poetry, and what impact, if any, has this had on your writing? Have you noticed that the actual performing of it has made you want to change it, or that's two questions really in one.
Well, I've been, apart from 3 gigs in while I was at university, just there's a thing going, I'll try some poetry because if I was bored with my material, but properly performing October. I hadn't been on stage for a couple of months, which was weird. And I didn't have any stand-up that I was happy with, but I did have at that point about 20 minutes of my verse memorised. So I just stuck spoken word open mic night into a search engine and went to the first one that seemed like it was still active, and it's been going well. As for the act of me performing hasn't changed, because as I said, I write with speaking to an audience in mind naturally. What has changed it is seeing, because you're at a gig, unless you're a complete tool, you stick around and watch other people, listen to other words, and that's changed it, because it shows what the well-trod ground is. So I just, if everyone and his dog is doing a fuck the Tories poem, to take an example out of thin air, I'm tempted to, I'll leave that and write something else. So it's made me focus a little more on the slightly stranger ideas, as opposed to, the first one I ever wrote, that sonnet I mentioned it during the insomnia. It was a lovely little thing. It rhymes quite well, but it's just, she's got very pretty eyes. We all start that, but so it's the seeing how other people approach it has been the big effect, I think.
Do you find the experience differs very much between performing your poetry and acting or doing stand-up comedy? In terms of performance?
Yeah. I think your standard comedy audience can be has every chance of being as welcoming and engaging and supportive as your standard poetry audience, but comedy is steeped in irony and cynicism in this country, certainly. Other scenes vary. It's the ability to be earnest, and the fact that a poetry audience won't shy away from, this is how I actually feel about a subject, that is the big difference, and is why I keep coming back, because maintaining cynicism just to write is exhausting, whereas with thinking of myself as a spoken word type, I can still do jokes between poems. I can still do things like playing with how I present myself to the audience and the gaze and talking to the front row. It's the thing that is wonderful is be enthusiastic and slightly vulnerable and genuine. I think is what I like about it. You get a lot of genuineness, being genuine, genuosity, filtered through this lovely artistic fiction, and that is purely selfish reasons. I prefer it because it's much easier than trying to get my therapy through the comedy.
Yeah. Well, we'll have a third and final poem, please.
Okay. What was it? I'll do this one. I'll do my poetry comes into 3 categories: miscellaneous, depression, and love. So I'll round it off with this one, which I think it's called On Humanity. I don't much like the title, but I can't think of a better one, so we'll call it On Humanity. Sometimes I feel numb, which shouldn't make sense because numbness is an absence of feeling, except that the numbness has got so bad that it starts to burn. Does anyone else get that? No? Alright. Do you ever like really fucking want to put your fist through a table? You don't, not because you're not able, but in case some shocked person cries out, "That's mahogany!" The agony of your personal odyssey isn't anything new. Don't you forget, you're not the first to get the hull of your trireme wet. 1,000 generations or more since ancient times have left their native shores and set sail for distant climes. 1,000 generations from a myriad of nations have braved these seas before you learnt how to breathe. Despite the odds set against them, your ancestors squared their shoulders, set their feet, and met them. They sailed through the crashing boulders and crossed the raucous seas. They reached the Caucasus and retrieved the golden fleece. You are the successful result of billions of years of evolution, and with every revolution of the wheel of fate, your ancestors grit their teeth and set a faster pace. No other species has sent one of their own into outer space. Now, we share 97% of our DNA with chimpanzees, and we have fucking crosswords and blackberry jam and artistic jamborees. While nice as they are, they're naked and live in trees. The ease with which we put ourselves down has always struck me as strange since the bricks of our molecular arrangements were forged in stars. You are the dust of stars, so you really must start trying to get some perspective. Do some good. Write some ringing invective. Just make sure the world's a better place by the time you leave. Because, sir and madam, I believe we are not the fallen descendants of Adam and of Eve. No, we are risen apes. And if that thought ever escapes you and you begin to hate your life or regret it or rue it, forget all else save this. You're human. And humans are great. So I'm sure you'll get through it.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Fucking crosswords.
Yeah.
Right, so final 2 questions.
Okay.
The first of which is, how would you like to see your writing progress?
I'd like to, because I think I do what I do quite well, you know, internal rhymes, showing off my education. I'm good at that, but I don't want it to get to a stage where I do that just because that's what I do. I need to try, fuck about with form or subject matter or things to A, see if I can do those and if I like those, but B, just to make certain that there's genuine active artistic intent behind things and it's not just, yeah, fuck it, that'll do, pup. this is an audio thing. I mimed writing negligently. For those of you keeping watch at home. And the other thing is I think I need a little more discipline with my stagecraft. Having these memorised chunks as big anchors helps, but the flow between poems and the meticulously scripted off-the-cuff remarks that I open and close with, I need they're as much a part of my set as anything else, and I need to give them a little more time and dedication, I think. Yeah.
Great. So have you got any recommendations for our listeners? And it doesn't have to be specifically regarding poetry, anything they can go and see, read or watch that you've recently experienced.
Lucretius's De Rerum Natura, which I think the Penguin translation is quite good if you need notes to help you. It's called On the Nature of the Universe, I think, or of everything. It's about 8,000 lines of Latin epic hexameter trying to explain Epicurean philosophy, which is atomist, basically atheistic. I'll accept the angry calls from Greek philosophers later. Basically atheistic, and it's concerned not about justice or goodness, about how to be happy, how to lessen suffering. And it's a wonderful philosophy written in very good poetry. That's number one. Children's poetry, I think, doesn't get enough look in these days, because it's certainly how I started, and I assume it's how most people, it's either that sort of thing or rap, it seems to be. So take some time, reread things you loved when you were a child. I teach a class of 8-year-olds, and last half term we were doing The Popple Who Had No Toes, The Jabberwocky, the Jumblies. You know, they went to in as if they did, and as if they went to sea. And I forgot quite how much. That is why I love poetry. So rediscover things you thought you'd forgotten. Oh, and just I have no idea how big his reputation is, but there's a wonderful Canadian called Shane Koyzan, Koyzan, who, if I need to cry, I go listen to him. Most beautiful stuff going, with some wonderfully silly jokes in it as well. So there's 3 to be getting on with.
Great, thank you very much.
Welcome.
And that's it. So thank you, Alexander Woodward.
Entirely okay.
I've been Lizzy Palmer, and thank you for listening.